are so many more sunscreens on the market these days, and that's a big win for all of us who love sunscreen, but then it means that you have to, shuffle through all the sunscreens and decide which ones you love. So today I'm gonna tell you all the new sunscreens that I am loving right now, and I also pick sunscreens that are good for all skin types, including people with oily skin. Before I get started, I think it's really important to point out that I have talked about my love for other sunscreens already, so I will definitely link all of those videos in the description box because I still love those sunscreens. Today, I'm gonna talk about some of the newer sunscreens that I've been using and that I think are really interesting and special and that I find myself reaching for a little bit more often now. So the one I'm gonna start with first is this one from EltaMD. This is their UV Stick Broad Spectrum SPF 50+ for face and body. This is one of the first stick sunscreens that I am interested in. I've tried a few other sunscreens that come in like a stick form, especially for reapplication, and I just didn't really see the hype. Like some of them felt a little too greasy for me and a little bit too glowy for me, and some of them just felt, I don't know, like I just wouldn't use them. A lot of them tend to be a little bit thicker and leave a huge white cast, and it's kind of the point of them. I think about stick sunscreens and I think about lifeguards on TV in like the 90s and the early 2000s that would have almost like a purple nose because they'd put this thick layer of sunscreen on. So that's what my association with stick sunscreens is, but this one is really nice. I find myself using it all the time. The brand originally sent this to me because we did a sponsorship together on Instagram, but the minute I started using it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so good. Besides being SPF 50+, in my opinion, anything above SPF 30 is a big win, but if you can get SPF 50, you're in a better place. It's also all mineral filters, which makes it a really unique formula because it doesn't feel dry on your skin. It doesn't feel pasty on your skin. It tends to blend into your skin pretty well. I have yet to try it on an array of skin tones, so it could very well leave a white cast and I don't know it. But so far from what I've seen, it's really nice and it doesn't leave that white cast after it settles down. I also find it to be pretty moisturizing, but not overly glossy or dewy looking, which I know a lot of people don't love. It's easy to carry around in your purse. I use it on the airplane. I use it after I put on some makeup. I still have to touch up my makeup a little bit afterwards, but it's just so easy to use, and then you just throw on a little bit more makeup, like some powder and then a little bit of blush, and you are so good to go. My children use this. Isla loves this stuff. She loves putting it on herself after I've actually put it on her, but still, she's really into using the sunscreen. Another thing I'll point out is that I tend to not use this as my primary sunscreen. I still go for your more typical type of like gel or lotion type of sunscreen when I go with my first application, and that's because it's just more precise to me. My problem with using like a stick sunscreen or a powder sunscreen or a spray sunscreen as your main form of sunscreen is that it might be a little bit uneven with application. I do think you can get a pretty even application with a stick as long as you're going over an area more than once. I'd say like 3 to 4 times over an area just to make sure you really get that even application with it. But I do use this more as a reapplication sunscreen. Next up is a really interesting sunscreen from Glow Recipe. This is their Watermelon Glow Niacinamide Sunscreen, SPF 50. So this is a hybrid sunscreen, meaning that it has both mineral filters and it also has chemical filters. And what I really like about this, there are actually 2 things I really like about this sunscreen. One is that it gives you a glow, it's not like a dewy glow. It actually has like a luminizing effect, which I really like because you guys know that I tend to use like a luminizer sometimes underneath my foundation. So in some ways this takes the place of that. It's not as intense of a glow as your typical luminizer, but it's still really interesting that it has that in here. I also love that it is an SPF 50. I feel like Glow Recipe is doing a really good job of paying attention to skincare trends and just really listening to the fact that we wanted an SPF 50 instead of an SPF 30. It also has a really nice light formulation to it. It's kind of like a emulsion texture, so it goes on feeling very light. So for people who hate sunscreen, the texture of it is actually really nice. It does seem like it's going to leave white cast on your skin when you first apply it, but then it just turns into like this really dewy, pretty luminizing effect on your skin. It dries down to this really nice, comfortable matte texture, so you still get that dewy glow, but it doesn't feel greasy on the skin. And I know a lot of people don't like that. I'm personally okay with it. I love that dewy feeling, that hydrating, moisturizing feeling. It's a really nice sunscreen. It's very special in my opinion. I do have a couple of notes about it. One, I was really excited about a watermelon fragrance in this sunscreen. But what I do find with this is that initially you kind of get like a hint of the watermelon scent, but it immediately turns into a sunscreen smell. So it's not bad because I use lots of sunscreens that have that typical sunscreen smell. But I think in this one, I was really looking forward to having a watermelon fragrance. And I feel like you just don't really get that. It dissipates quickly. The other note that I will say about this is that when it dries down to that matte texture, if you are the kind of person like me who like takes your time to apply and you constantly are like rubbing your face, I wouldn't do that with this sunscreen. There's a little bit of a learning curve in my opinion. If you continue to touch it, it does pill just a little bit. It's not intense. There are way worse sunscreens out there that pill dramatically with your makeup especially. This one doesn't do that. This one's just like very slight, but it does dry down quickly. And I think that that's something to just know is that if you try this and you feel like it's pilling, it's just a learning curve. Like you have to learn how to apply it quickly and just let it set. All that said, I think this is a beautiful sunscreen. I think most people are going to really enjoy this. I know I'm enjoying using this. I think it's really innovative as well. And I love that it has niacinamide in it. Of course I love niacinamide. I talk about it all the time. It's one of the core ingredients of my own skincare brand. And there's also ingredients that soothe your skin like aloe and also hyaluronic acid for hydration. So it's a really nice sunscreen. I think for an American sunscreen, it also really rivals the texture of Asian sunscreens. So it's really nice. I encourage you to try it out because there aren't very many like this. Next up is this one from Neutrogena. This is the Hydro Boost Water Gel Lotion Sunscreen SPF 50. I feel like it's really important to find sunscreens that are much more affordable because sunscreens these days are just, they're so expensive. I think we're seeing more and more options, but they're not always great options. This one is really interesting to me because it is SPF 50. This one feels nice and light on the skin. It has this gel cream kind of texture to it and it dries down to a matte texture. This is an all chemical filter sunscreen because it dries down to this matte texture. And also I forgot to mention this with the glow recipe, because it dries down to this matte texture, I don't find it getting into my eyes. It's not like running into my eyes and eventually irritating my eyes at all. Both of them feel really nice on the skin and you don't have to set them. Usually with sunscreens that have chemical filters in them, I eventually have to set them with powder just to make sure they don't run into my eyes because then I end up with the most irritated, watery eyes the rest of the day. And it's very annoying to have to deal with that. So this does not do that because it dries down to this matte texture. It's also water resistant. So if you do have oily skin or if you do find yourself outside a lot, like maybe you're a person that goes for runs in the morning outside and you find yourself sweating or you do spend time at the beach, then this one is a better option for you if you just want to have like a one and done sunscreen and not have different options of sunscreen to wear throughout the week. This one wears nicely under makeup. It feels comfortable. It dries down matte and it's also water resistant. So this is a really good option for $15. My one critique is that I hate the fragrance of it. It is a pretty strong fragrance and it's not even a fragrance that I love. So that's one thing, but that's very personal. So you have to try it out for yourself. Next up is this one from Live Tinted. This is the Huegard 3-in-1 Mineral Sunscreen Moisturizer Primer. This one is an SPF 30, but it is an all mineral sunscreen. It is 18% zinc oxide that you get in here, but it does not leave a white cast, at least not an intense white cast. I have seen some people with melanin-rich skin tones say that it does leave a white cast on them, but it does actually look good on a variety of skin tones. And I think that's a really big win for an all mineral sunscreen, especially with 18% zinc oxide in it. You really have to work on that formula to get it right. And this just feels really nice on the skin. It doesn't have that mattifying texture to it, but it doesn't feel greasy on your skin either. It's just right. It's like right in the middle. It can technically be your moisturizer for people that have oily skin, or you can put it on your moisturizer for people like me with dry skin and it still feels really nice. The one critique I do have of it though is it's an SPF 30. I think that's perfectly fine and I'd rather you use an SPF 30 versus not at all, especially if you're looking for something that feels really nice on your skin. This is a sunscreen that I tend to use when I'm inside the house most of the day. Then I go ahead and throw this one on just because it feels so good on the skin. Next up is this one from Image Skincare. This is the Prevention Plus Daily Matte Moisturizer SPF 32. This one is a hybrid sunscreen as well. This has octinoxate in it and zinc oxide. What I like about this one is it feels truly like a moisturizer. That's really what stood out to me. It does dry down to a little bit of a matte texture to it, but it's not overly matte. And I think that's what the theme is here with a lot of these sunscreens that I'm talking about is it's not this intensely matte kind of sunscreen and dry down, where people like me with dry skin just cannot use it, where we're like, oh my gosh, this is just so drying on my skin that it feels uncomfortable. The other thing I really like about it, and I know this isn't like a reason to choose a sunscreen, but I like the scent of it. This one has this nice, like almost like a fruity citrus scent to it. Whenever I put it on, it makes me happy. It's like an orange Julius or something that you put onto your face, and it feels so good. You can see it has a little bit of a glow, and it feels really nourishing and hydrating to your skin. I think what makes it different when I say it feels like it's hydrating and moisturizing is it has the quick water break. If you don't know what that means, it really basically means that it feels like it's hydrating your skin as you apply it, but then it dries down to this comfortable matte texture, this matte dry down. So it's a really nice sunscreen for all skin types. Again, my one critique is that it's an SPF 32, so it's not as high of an SPF as I would like it to be, but it's great to use if you're gonna be indoors most of the day and you just need, you know, your basic sunscreen that does just the right amount of protection. This is a really good one. Next up is this one from Tatcha. This is the Silk Sunscreen Hydrating Mineral Shield SPF 50. And it kind of kills me to say how much I love this stuff. It is such a nice mineral sunscreen, but this thing is $60. It's 0.17 ounces. It doesn't even look like it's 1.7 ounces because it's this really cool packaging that's almost like a flat kind of card almost. But the stuff is so nice for a mineral sunscreen. I think that's like really important to point out. I'm saying this is nice for a mineral filter sunscreen because we all know mineral filter sunscreens can be very pasty feeling, they can be very drying and just very uncomfortable on the skin and also leave a terrible white cast. I mean, the chances of a mineral sunscreen just looking gross on your skin are so high that I dread sometimes trying mineral sunscreens. This one doesn't do this to me. It's just nice. It has this beautiful fluid texture to it. It almost rivals like the texture of Asian sunscreens as well, but it's all mineral filters. It's very hard to explain this feeling. It feels really, really nice. It has a little bit of a tone to it, like a beige kind of tone to it that I think helps to minimize the white cast that you would normally get. And it dries down to this really nice matte texture. Again, like I said, with most of these sunscreens I've been talking about, it's a comfortable matte feeling. So it's not gonna be super dewy and shiny looking, but it's also not gonna be so dry that it feels uncomfortable on your skin. It dries down just right. It also has a really nice ingredient list. And I think in some ways that ingredient list justifies the price of this sunscreen. I mean, I can only imagine that creating such a nice feeling mineral sunscreen probably took a lot of time and money in the innovation side of it, but it has nice ingredients that help to soothe your skin and really make it feel comfortable on your skin. It has niacinamide in here, which we know all the skincare brands are watching the trends, and niacinamide is a very big trend right now. It has hyaluronic acid in here to just make it feel nice and nourishing to the skin. There's squalane, there's bisabolol, I never say that right, but it's also a very nice soothing ingredient for your skin. The list just goes on and on. There's hydrolyzed silk in here to help also just make it feel really nourishing for your skin. So it's a really nice formulation. I was surprised by how much I really liked it because, like I said, whenever I see an all mineral sunscreen, I'm like, this is gonna feel terrible, isn't it? Not this one. This one is really, really interesting to feel on your skin. It's like, it feels like a really nice primer. And it dries down like powdery soft. It's very, very nice. The one thing I will say is I haven't seen anyone with darker skin try the sunscreen out to tell me if there is, you know, a white cast or not. I'm willing to bet there are some people that will get a white cast with this just because of the nature of it. It's a mineral sunscreen. It just is a little bit pricey, but I kind of feel like it's worth it. If you can afford to get this, I say try it. Next up is not a sunscreen, but it complements your sunscreen, and that is Heliocare. You've probably heard me talk about this before. My friend, Dr. Nina Desai, suggested that I start taking this because she had done some of the studies of Firm Block, which is the antioxidant that's used in this supplement. I use this every single day. You just need one pill, and the way it works is it's not sunscreen, but it does boost your sun protection, if that makes sense. And it's basically just giving you that antioxidant protection that goes hand in hand with your sunscreen. So if you are like me, for instance, and you have melasma and you're trying to, you know, avoid anything that can trigger it, including the sun, which is one of the worst things for your melasma, then this is really good for you. By the way, these are not not claims that they're making with this supplement. This is what I'm saying to you. And just for anybody who wants to boost that sun protection, Heliocare is awesome. It does not taste weird. I never even noticed that I take this, and I take lots of different supplements and pills for, you know, like my hypothyroidism and everything, and this doesn't bother me. This is an easy to take pill. I have this on my Amazon subscription at this point, so I get it delivered to me every single month, and I think it's just really easy to add into your routine, and you get that added protection. I've really seen a difference with my skin too using this. So before I end this video, I know I mentioned that these sunscreens work for all skin types, including oily skin, but there's kind of a scale of what works best for oily skin that I talked about and what starts to work better for, you know, like more dry skin. So I feel like I should kind of rate it from my opinion. Being a person with dry skin, keep that in mind. First, for people with oily skin that they don't want anything in the middle, they just want something that dries down matte, I would say it's the Neutrogena is the best of all the ones I mentioned for oily skin and has the most dry down, I'd say, like the most matte texture. Next up would be this one from Tatcha, which I think is really great for people with oily skin because, you know, I feel like it's really hard to find a mineral sunscreen that feels good on oily skin. There are already mineral filter sunscreens out there that have a matte finish, but they don't necessarily feel good. Like they go on feeling kind of thick and creamy, and I think that really turns off people with oily skin whenever I get feedback. This one feels like a serum when you're putting this on. It's nice and light. It almost feels like it could have an oil texture that might throw you off a little bit when you first start to apply it if you have oily skin. It doesn't bother me at all, but it dries down much more matte than you would ever expect it to. Next up, I would say this one from Glow Recipe. Like I said, it does dry down to a mostly matte texture, and this one starts to be more in like the middle when it comes to that dry down, because I do think this is super comfortable also for people with dry skin. Just like the Tatcha, I think that one's pretty comfortable for dry skin as well, but I put the Tatcha before this one, mostly because it does have the luminizer in it, and I question if people with oily skin actually want the luminizer in their sunscreen. I'm not positive of this, but I could see people with oily skin being like, I don't need extra glow, so even though it dries down matte, I don't want the luminizer either. My opinion. Next up would be this one from Image Skincare. Like I said, it starts off feeling really hydrating on the skin, and I actually think it would be great for people with oily skin, but I can see people with oily skin being like, this isn't matte enough for me. I will say though, if you have oily skin, this is great as your moisturizer too. So if you skip your moisturizer and put this on, then it's actually wonderful for people with oily skin. I use this, me with dry skin, I put my moisturizer on and then I apply this for context. So this one is really great, and from the feedback I've heard from other people that have oily skin, they love this as their moisturizer. It's a one and done product for them and it feels great. Next up, I would say this one from Live Tinted is really the most comfortable. Like it's right in the middle. I think, again, for me with dry skin, I wear my moisturizer and then put this on top. But for people with oily skin, you could probably get away with using this as your moisturizer and you're just like one and done. But I'll say that if it's between these two, that if you want to have just like a moisturizer slash sunscreen, I'd probably go with this one because it feels a little bit more hydrating, whereas this one feels a little bit more like a primer. And then last, I'd say this one, and it's not because I think it's bad for oily skin, but it is a little bit thicker, and it's just by nature of being a stick sunscreen. I don't want anyone with oily skin to try this out and then think, you know what, this feels like there's a little bit of a film on my skin. It could very well feel like that to somebody with oily skin because it's not a matte dry down. It's just a very comfortable dry down. Like it's not a super greasy dry down that I find with a lot of different stick sunscreens. It's just a really nice, comfortable dry down in my opinion. And so it doesn't feel thick and it doesn't leave this huge thick white cast on your skin. But for somebody with oily skin, you might not like the feel of this. But if you're looking for a stick sunscreen, you might end up liking this. So those are my favorite sunscreens right now. Even by end of year, I might be like, well, there's a whole bunch more sunscreens I love and here's an updated video. But who knows? Until then, we just have to wait and see what comes out. But I've heard through the grapevine, there are so many more sunscreens coming this year. A ton, like a ton from what I've heard already from different brands. So get ready. I think like sunscreen's really gonna get its spotlight in Sephora, in, you know, like all the regular retailers. It's just gonna be an explosion of sunscreen all year round. So get ready for it because I think we're just gonna be doing this topic a few more times this year. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions about the sunscreens I've been talking about, let me know in the comments. You can find me on Instagram. I'm at Susan Yara. I'll talk to you soon.